In this video, we're going to be covering install of our new Underglow kits by Next Level Glow. So we brought these kits out quite a few months ago, and it's just been a waiting process trying to find the time to be able to actually do an install ourselves and do a video for you guys so you get a better idea of what's included in the kit and just what's involved in the actual install. Well, we're finally at a point, we got a little bit of a break in the weather, and we are going to go ahead and get this installed on our shop truck. So our standard kits come with 6 LED strips, that is 2 for the front, 2 for the side, and 2 for the rear of the car. You can add extra strips to a kit if you choose the pairs section that's on the website, and this will enable you to make it a 4-piece, a 5-piece, or more if you desire, but our basic kits are designed for a 6-piece setup. With our kits, it does include the 6 strips in various sizes depending on what size you need. We currently have anything from 12-inch, 18, 24, 36, 48, 64, 72, and 80-inch sizes available. We also have 5-meter rolls in case you're trying to cut a super specific size for a car, but that is a little bit more of an advanced thing. You will have to solder the connections, you will have to make sure that everything is waterproof once again afterwards, and you may also need a signal booster depending on the lengths and other things that you're doing. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to be covering that in this video, but we may be able to cover it in a future video. Also included with our standard kits is our controller, and we will go over that in just a little bit, but it is based on an SP105E with a little bit of extra hardware added to make it more suitable for a vehicle. We also include 4 extensions. They are 2 meters long each, and it's meant to go around the wheel wells on the vehicle. We also include a hardware kit. In that kit comes 40 self-tapping screws, 20 silicone strip brackets, 10 zip ties, and 10 adhesive-backed zip tie holders for you to secure it to the vehicle. We also include 2 caps for the end of the strips. All of our strips have inputs and outputs, and it is important that on the last strips, any outputs that are not covered have these installed to help prevent corrosion or anything else from affecting the strips. We do have 2 tier levels on our LEDs. We have our better tier and our best tier. The better tier is meant to compete with other industry leaders, offering a more complete install package with higher quality components and similar, if not better, output levels. And our best tier is meant to blow out the competition. If you're looking for the brightest on the market, the best tier is what you want to look at. While our kits do include the silicone brackets meant for installing the strips to the vehicle, we do recommend considering switching up to LED aluminum rails. I have a set of rails here. These are 2 meter long. You can get these in 1 or 2 meter lengths depending on the application and what you're using it for. A pair of 10 snips is easy enough to cut these to size depending on what you're running it on. And the self-tapping screws are a good way to secure that to the vehicle, as we'll show in the install here shortly. We do have a link to these in particular, but it's important that whatever rail you go with, you consider that the strips are about 15 millimeters wide, so you're going to want a 15 or 16 millimeter wide channel for those strips to fit in. Many of the other options on the market are thinner, so they will fit in a smaller rail, but because we opted for higher quality components and a wider PCB, ours will need a wider channel than you may be used to. Our controller is based on an SP105E, but with a few added components to make it more suitable for vehicle use. Those of you familiar with our ProFlow controllers will be familiar with this design. We have a battery saver built in. This will disconnect the power from the car when the LEDs are not in use. A common issue with addressable LEDs, or Flow Series, Color Flow, NeoPixel, whatever you prefer to call them, is that they will draw power even when not in use. It's a smart LED, so it will actually stay in a standby mode, drawing some power. The number of LEDs in your system will determine how much power it's drawing, as well as the LED type. We use a UCS LED type, which unfortunately does have a rather high power draw when in standby mode, but has the higher quality, better longevity, and higher output that we really wanted in our kits. So to combat that issue with the power draw, we have our battery savers built into the controllers. The battery saver will deactivate the power to the LEDs when not in use, and it will turn them on when it gets signal from the vehicle. We have 3 signal wires included. We have 2 turn signals, one for the right and one for the left, and we have a DRL wire. This way, for normal functions, when you get in the vehicle, you start it up, you start rolling down the road, it does the normal functions. Now these are optional. You do not have to connect these wires if you choose not to. But if you do, you will get a white DRL startup animation that will flow from the front of the vehicle to the back and then back up to the front. And you will also get a sequential turn signal. Now, these are not required, and you do want to check your local laws to verify that this is legal on the street where you live. We also include another form of activation for things like the show modes. That is the included remote. The remote will activate the relay when you push the on button, and it will turn the relay off when you push off. This is a quick and easy way to activate your show modes, and it will play whatever the previously played show mode is. So if you like a certain mode, you set it on that mode, you can just use the on and off button to turn that on and off, and you don't have to use the app to start and stop the show modes. It is important to note that if you choose to use the turn signals and not the DRL, the turn signals will activate the relay, but they will only work on one side of the car. So if you're using a right turn and you're not running the DRL wire, it will activate the relay and it will play whatever show mode was last played on the controller. So if you're driving down the road, you only have the turn signals hooked up and not the DRL. As soon as you activate a turn signal, if there is a show mode currently on in the controller, it will play that on the opposite side of the car. This is a way that you can go into the app and you can choose a solid color if you choose. Say you pull up to an event and you want to have your show modes running, or maybe you want to have a solid DRL that is not white. You could do that in this way by selecting in the app what color you want it to be and turning it on with the on button on the remote. This will enable that color to be your DRL while the remote is active. It will not be automatic. There is not a way to change the DRL color. Most laws on the streets are that any colors need to be white for your DRL and amber for your turn signals, and that is how the controller is designed. But once again, always consider your local laws and regulations when deciding whether or not to run any kind of underbody lighting on the street. On the controller, we have a power and ground connection with ring terminals that can go directly to the battery. We do recommend going directly to the battery unless you have a car with the battery in the trunk, as the battery connection is generally your strongest connection and will have the least potential for issues. It does have a built-in fuse holder as well in the event that you need to disconnect power temporarily, or if a fuse were to pop at some point and you need to replace it, you can just remove the cap and the fuse will be found directly under. And this is a 20 amp fuse. The size of the fuse that you use will just depend on the application and how many LEDs you're running, but 20 amp is about where you want to be. Definitely don't go over 30. Lastly, on the controller, we do have 2 extensions for your right and left channels, and these are typically ran from the controller to the first strips in your series, which is generally on the front bumper, so it flows backwards. Lastly, on the controller, we do have 2 outputs, and this is for your left and right channel. It is important to note that these do correlate with the wire coming out. So this turn signal wire connects with this output, and this turn and DRL wire connects with this output. And you can make note of how they come out of the box as to which one connects with which. The reason why this is important is that one is a left turn, one is a right turn. And if you mix those up, then it will not correlate with the vehicle. So if you're using the turn signals, you may end up activating the right turn signal and the left side flashes. This would be the thing to look at if that does happen. Now moving on to the strips. They may or may not be in a bag like this, but you should find 6 or more strips depending on the kit size that you choose. This particular kit was made specific for our truck, so it is actually longer than the options on the website. If you find that you need a kit that is bigger than normal, there is a premium for that, and there is a little bit of a wait time to get custom kits made, but it is something we can do if it's necessary. But to get the best bang for the buck in the fastest shipping times, you're generally going to want to try to stick with kits that are on the website and listed as in stock. If it says back order available, that means that a certain size that you've chosen is out of stock. You can either choose a different size, or you can choose to order something that is out of stock, understanding that it may take us a little bit to get them back in stock and ship them out. One of the key factors that make our strips better than the competition is pixel density. Pixel density is the spacing between LEDs. And if you compare this to other brands, most brands are running about 60 LEDs per meter. That means that every 1 meter of LED strip has 60 LEDs on it. We run a density of 84 LEDs per meter. So that means that we have about 30% more LEDs on our strips than the competitors. We do still have cut marks on our strips so that they can be cut, extended, or made different sizes if necessary. But once again, we do recommend trying to find the right size for your vehicle, and any cuts made will void the warranty, and you will need to make sure that they are waterproofed properly to prevent any potential issues. On the back of our strips, we use a 3M VHB tape. This tape we find sticks very well to most surfaces, extremely well to the LED channels. But in general, you're gonna wanna make sure that whatever surface you stick this to is clean before you adhere it. Once this picks up dirt, it's not gonna stick to anything. Another quality component that we chose to use in our setups is our waterproof barrel connectors. We use high quality 18 gauge flat barrel connectors. This enables us to carry a higher load to the LED strips, effectively preventing any power injection on most kits. Some kits may still need some at the end of the run. With the flat cables, you are able to get a lot more flexibility than you would with an 18 gauge round, and that is why we went with that size. And these kind of strips do have an input and output, so it is important to make note of that before installing on the vehicle. You will see an arrow on the strip itself indicating the flow direction. If the arrow is pointing away from the plug, that is the input side. If it's pointing towards the plug, that is the output side. So keeping in mind, assuming that you're doing a normal installation application where you start from the front of the vehicle and work your way out, the input application will be at the front and the output will be moving towards the rear of the vehicle. For those of you choosing to make your own strips with 5-meter rolls, we will include some of our signal boosters. This is something that we discovered in testing. On some applications, we were getting some noise from the vehicle. So we went ahead and put signal boosters on our best tier pre-cut strips to help avoid any possible issues. This is not always the case on every build, but to avoid potential complications, if you are making your own strips, you'll probably want to go ahead and install those. But as you can see, they are pre-installed on our pre-cut strips. And before install on the vehicle, it's very important that you test all strips prior. So I'm gonna lay them out on the floor here, and we're gonna hook up the controller. I'm gonna make sure everything's working properly. If you have any issues, definitely reach out, and you're gonna wanna do that before you install on the vehicle. We can go ahead and get a replacement strip out to you. Unfortunately, due to the nature of Underglow and the abuse that it sees on a normal car, we are not able to provide free warranty replacement on strips after they've been installed. While we typically see installs last for many years, we also see some lowered vehicles that bottom out, scrape, and damage strips. And this is not a defect of the product as much as an aspect of the environment that you're driving in. So it is important that you test all strips before installing on the vehicle. So now I have everything laid out here. I have my side strips, my rear strips, and my front strips. Once again, I am doing an 8-piece kit. Typically they are a 6-piece. But as you can see, I do have them laid out, and I do have my extensions between each where the wheel wells are gonna go, just to simulate how it will be laid out on the car. If you want to test real quick, you can just push the on button on the remote. That will activate the show modes, and it will just cycle through. You can download the app, play with it a little bit if you like to here, but ultimately you're just testing to make sure all the strips are working. So in this case, everything is working as it should be. Next, if you want, you can go ahead and test the DRL and turn signal functions as well. This is our DRL startup animation. It will start at the beginning of the car, flow to the end, and then come back up, and then fill in full bright. So it does draw some attention when you do start up the car. If you come out and you unlock the car and your vehicle emits a DRL signal to the lights, it will do the same thing as well. And that will depend on the car. Some cars do, some cars don't. This truck that we'll be installing it on actually does a turn signal animation upon unlock and locking. Here is your turn signal function. As you can see, it is a sequential function that runs down to the end of the strip. And depending on your application and how long you run, you may actually not see the turn signal function go clear to the end of the strip. But in most applications, especially in a case of a long crew cab 2500, it is long enough to run the full length of the strip. Now, as mentioned, in some cases you will have an issue where some of the strips near to the end are yellow. Now, this is because of the amount of power draw. So if you think about this system, right now, the way I have it hooked up, all of the power is being pulled from the front of the system to the strips at the rear. And in this particular kit, it's extremely long. And because of that, we do have an issue where there's not quite enough power going through to make the rear light LEDs light up the whole way. In many cases, you will be able to actually fix the problem just by adding an extra ground into the system. If we add this one ground wire, you can see everything got a lot brighter. So in many cases, this may be enough. If you do see a problem, you can just add an extra ground at the end. And we do have pigtails available, or you can cut off the connectors at the end and just strip back and use the black wire to tap into a ground on the vehicle. If you do that and you're still seeing some yellow like I am on these strips here, you can go ahead and add in an extra power source. Now, it is important to note that because we are using a battery saver, that power source will need to go after the controller. So you would have to tap in somewhere along these plugs here to make sure that it is killing power when the controller's not on. But I went ahead and ran it so you get an idea. As soon as I turn it on, everything goes away. So that is unfortunate aspect of a high output system as this. Our better tier does not have this problem because it is more competitive with what is on the market right now. But on the best tier, unfortunately, it's just an aspect of the amount of power that these strips require to get to full brightness. And once again, most kits will not have this issue. It just depends on the length of the kit. The longer the kit, the more likely you are to see that problem. But if you do see that problem, it's a pretty simple solution to it. Adding the ground in most cases will fix your issue. And in some cases, if you're doing a very large vehicle or a very long run on a vehicle, you will need to add that power as well. So now that we've tested all the strips, we're ready to go ahead and start install on the vehicle. So first we're gonna go ahead and install the controller. And you wanna locate the battery under the hood of your car or whatever the best location is for your power and ground. If you have something like a Charger or another vehicle that has the battery in the back, you generally find a red power terminal somewhere under the hood near the fuse box, and then a solid ground is usually located somewhere within that vicinity. Now, ultimately on the ground, it's very, very important that it is a clean ground, that there's no paint that can obstruct the ground itself. And generally, if you do have to go to a chassis ground, you want to make sure that it is an actual chassis ground and not just an exposed bolt on the frame somewhere. But anytime that a battery is accessible under the hood, I highly recommend going directly to the battery, as that is the best source for power and ground on your vehicle. Once you've located the best location for your controller, you go ahead and just set it near that area, and we're gonna go ahead and route our wires for the LEDs. When running the wires, it is important to note that there are many things under the hood that get very hot. You're going to want to make sure that you avoid anything like the radiator or any turbos or exhaust systems or anything like that that's under the hood that will get hot. So in my case, I'm just running it down along the light here, and then down through here and around and straight down, avoiding any radiators or anything else that gets hot, just to avoid the potential that any wiring gets burnt. Then I ran it down, and it's just sitting on the ground right now so that we can go ahead and mock up the LED rails going around the front and down to the back. This is also a good time when you can go ahead and run your connections for your DRLs and turn signals if you're choosing to do that. In general, you'll want to run your turn signal and your DRL wire with the white and the yellow to the closest headlight. Most of the time your DRL wires will be located on the back, and it will vary car to car, so you will need to be able to diagnose which wire is that DRL. Another possibility that you could tap into is an ACC circuit in the fuse box. This is a circuit that generally is activated when the key is in the on position, which will work very similarly to a DRL in that sense. For the single yellow wire, that is for the far side turn signal, depending on where your battery is located. And you're going to want to run this in a similar fashion, avoiding anything that moves or anything that gets hot under the hood so that you don't have it wrap around anything and you don't have it burn. You're going to also need to locate that turn signal on the light on the far side and tap into that as well. On your rails, you are going to want to cut them to length based on the strip into each section. Some strips might be a little bit longer, some strips might be a little bit shorter, so you'll have to extend the channel if necessary by adding multiples together and cut where necessary. Just put your strip starting at the far end, lay it loosely in the channel, and then you can take a pair of 10 snips like this and just mark where you're going to want to cut that. Then pull your strip out, cut the other side, and if you just bend it back just like that, it'll snap right off. I'll go ahead and do 2 of these. That way I've got one for the left and one for the right side. So now I have left and right. and I'll go ahead and do the same on the sides and the rear. Unfortunately, it started raining on us, so we went ahead and pulled it in the garage here so we could finish up install. I got the rails cut, one for each side. And the best way to secure these to the bottom of the car is using the self-tapping screws that we included in the kit. Now they will actually screw into the surface using that self-tapping tip, so you can put them on a metal location or plastic if need be. Ideally, you're gonna want a metal surface if possible, and you wanna make sure that you're gonna orient these in a place where they're not likely to get scraped off in the event that the front, rear, sides, or any other part of the car were to ground out on something. So you're gonna wanna avoid things like the frame rails or the extreme front of bumpers, any area like that that's going to be a high risk of actually scraping when you're pulling in and out of parking lots or going over speed bumps. For installing the screws, I like to use a impact such as this. It will work pretty good at actually getting it through the metal, but you can also use a drill if you prefer, but you're going to want some kind of a power tool for this, probably not by hand. Now for this application, I'm going to go ahead and secure my first rail in right here. And once again, I'm trying to avoid any areas that are low lying, like right here. While you may think putting it there will get better output, which is probably true, the bigger issue here would be that this has a higher chance of scraping on things as you're driving down the road or pulling into a parking lot or anything like that, which is not ideal. You don't want to damage your strips. So if I put it up here, it'll be out of the way, nothing will hit it. It'll also be less likely to be seen when you're driving down the road or anything like that. You know, it's not always ideal to be able to see the strips. So keep that in mind when you're trying to locate where you want to put it. Output is important, but also trying to put it in a place where it's safe and protected is also very important. So I'm going to screw in 2 places, here and here. Also keeping in mind, at least in the case of this truck or any other vehicle, you want to make sure that it's far enough back that the tire itself is not going to hit. So in a case of a truck like this where I have a larger tire, I do have to keep in mind that it does cut in a little bit further than normal. So I will secure it in a place where it's far enough out of the way, but the output will still be good down to the ground. Now once the rail is secured in place, you can go ahead and get your strip installed here. So we're just going to go ahead and peel back that adhesive. Start with a small section so you don't risk having that adhesive backing touch anything dirty, and just go ahead and push it into place, pulling back more of the adhesive tape and securing it in place the whole way down the rail. Now, even though the adhesive will generally hold onto the rail perfectly fine, one thing that I do like to do just for security is using one of these zip ties, and on each end, and if it's a long run like their side skirts, maybe one in the middle, just go ahead and do an extra little zip tie there. And basically, if for some reason it starts to let go of the rail and start to fall off, these zip ties will hold it in place so that you are more likely to be able to see it and address it before it creates a bigger issue. Now once you have that insecure and you have the zip ties on both ends, you can go ahead and connect our connection to the controller. And you are going to make sure that you secure these lines out of the way so they don't have a chance of dropping down. I'm actually going to zip tie them up to a place that I can see up there inside the bumper, and that should help to keep them out of the way so that they don't run the risk of hanging down and getting caught on anything. Once again, warranty will not cover things being ripped off by road debris or anything like that, so this part is pretty important just to make sure that your kit lasts for many years to come. In your kit, you will have 4 2-meter extensions, and the point of these is to get from the front 2 strips over the wheel well to your side skirts and over the back wheel well to the rear strips. It is important to remember that there is a male and female side of the plug, and you want to make sure that you plug in to the output on your front strip to make sure that you don't get this backwards. Then you're going to want to run it up through, generally over the mud guard, once again ensuring that it cannot wrap around anything moving or be burnt by anything that gets extremely hot. Secure in place with zip ties or anything else as necessary, and then move on to the side skirts, securing them in a similar fashion to what we did the front strip, and then running your second extension over the back wheel, and then we'll secure the last section in the similar fashion. So as mentioned earlier, if you are running an extremely long kit, as in the case of a truck like this, you may see some yellowing when set to white, and this is basically the LEDs washing out. They're running out of power. As mentioned, you can run ground at the end of the strip, and that'll fix most of those problems. The easy way to do that is to locate your output side side on the last strip within your run. And you're going to want to do this on both sides, driver side and passenger. Whatever that last strip is in the run, go ahead and find the output line. On that output line, you can cut that off and then just strip back to expose the wires underneath the protective sheathing. You'll see there are 3 colors to that wire. We have a black, a green, and a red. The red is your power, the black is your ground, and the green is your data. Most of the time, you'll get away with just injecting ground, and that's really easy too because you can run that to any ground on the vehicle. So in the case of this truck, I have a solid ground in the rear. I will run it to that. Most cars, you have taillights, there's generally a ground at your taillights, but you can get creative in ways to actually run that ground. But a simple 18 gauge wire should be enough to make that ground solid and fix any yellowing that you might have when set to white. It is important to remember that any exposed wires or tips of the wires subject to water could create issues later on. So ideally, you're gonna wanna use some shrink tubing or something. I would add an extension to this, a little bit of 18 gauge wire, something like that, soldered with shrink tube, and then shrink tube over top of everything, just to keep it nice and watertight. So we finished up install, got a few videos of it on the truck, and here they are now.